Please do not. If that works, it's a miracle. Okay, well, it's a bonus. It's a bonus. It's doing
Great, thank you very much, Rebecca, for sorting out the recording. And thank you very much for coming today. I do appreciate there's a few people who haven't made it, that's why we're trying to record the session for. Welcome to the Chamber of Commerce Business Sustainability Group. My name is Ralph Peake, Chair of the organisation. I'd like to thank Honest Bank for supporting these series of events. We haven't actually got any branding with them today, but they have been very good in supporting all these events, and we've got a number of events lined up for the future. Thanks very much, Honest Bank, for that. So today, we've got a presentation from Lance Gas. So how does a fossil fuel company transition to net zero? There's plenty of questions. There'll be plenty of time to ask questions after. So Alex Herschel will be giving the presentation. We've got Joe Cox as well, who's CEO of all three Island Energy Groups. Thank you very much for coming, Joe. And we'll have plenty of time for questions after. Alex's presentation is around about 30-35 minutes. So we're looking forward to that. I'll now hand over to Sarah Jarvis, Head of Marketing for the group. I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you very much. Nothing that formal, really. I just wanted to say thank you very much for coming. I know people are dropping like flies at the moment. I got some messages to say, I've got COVID, can't come. I joined the business in August, a week after Joe joined the business in August, and we walked, and Alex has been in less time, but we walked straight into a world energy crisis. Interesting times, not quite what we thought we were signing up for when we signed up for it, but really incredibly exciting time to join what looked like a bit of a sick business, I suppose, certainly on the Isle of Man. I know that some of the messaging that we put out, advertising on the PR wires and all the rest of it, makes me feel extremely queasy. Not something that we want to be tying our colours to the mast with, that kind of thing. So I knew that that was something that would change. Joe was fully in agreement with that. Part of the exciting reasons to join was this is not often you get to come into a business and sort of change it from the floorboards up, which is really what we're trying to do. Joe has a very strong vision for how she wants the group to look. So that's Jersey, Guernsey and the Isle of Man. They're very different businesses. We supply natural gas here on the Isle of Man, but it's LPG in the other two islands that's shipped in. So it's a very different sort of business model, a different network, different issues. I mean, even the makeup of our customer base in Jersey particularly is like 60% at least commercial. So, where here we're very much on that sort of domestic and sort of small business kind of thing. So, we've got a very different looking kind of business model, I suppose, across the group. But the underlying thing is this: how do we move? How do we transition? It's really hard when you've got the kind of product that we do for anybody to look you in the eye and say, honestly, is that really what you're going to do? But yes, honestly, that is really what we are going to do. So Alex is based in Guernsey. I'll let her talk about her credentials, as it were, in this arena. But I thought it would be really, really interesting to bring somebody up from one of our sister companies from another island, somebody who's quite involved with the states of Guernsey and what the bailiwicks kind of strategies are, I suppose. Yes. Joe is here because we've got a leadership team session this week up here. So all three of us basically available to meet up with you anytime, have a chat with you at any time. Just reach out to us if you want to believe us about the direction that we're going. I'm telling you, this is changing. This business is really changing. It's quite exciting. Certainly as a marketer, for me, to be involved in something quite transformative, it's fascinating.
Unfortunately, Aidan, who is our MD, can't be here because he has COVID. But one of the first things that we did as a company is disperse the group structure and move it back to on island, which I think is really important because all the islands, as Sarah's inferred, are really, really different. But not just that, we want to really localise what we do. And we should be really bringing in an MD on each island, which is the first thing that we did as a group structure. It's working really well. I think Luke has been part of the Manx Gas Group for a while, and we've started to really laser focus on what does it mean for the Isle of Man? How do we give back to the Isle of Man and start to do things with a laser focus on this island? So whilst Alex is Guernsey MD, the reason that I chose all of the people around the leadership table is because they all bring something very, very different to that table. and Alex's credentials in environmental and that carbon neutrality and net zero agenda is critical to our business as we transition going forward. So that's why she's going to do that talk today.
Yep. Okay, so over to Alex, basically. So yeah, lots of time afterwards for questions or whatever. There should be plenty of time.
Lovely. Hello, everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come along today. So yes, a bit of my credentials. I've been in the environment sector for sort of 25 years before environmental impact, climate change, or anything else was really sort of, you know, front and forward stage. Now it's a different world. It's now top of all board agenda items. It's part of every conversation. I think all of us who've got young kids, it's they're asking the questions, what are we doing? You know, I've been part of sessions. I'm one of the founding members of the equivalent Sustainable Business Initiative in Guernsey. As Sarah was saying, I've also been doing a lot of work for the states of Guernsey on how to put sustainability into their government work plan, their 25-year plan. And I've spent, as I said, a long time working with governments and companies around the world to say, how do we solve what we need to? How do we understand what our impact is? And how do we go in the right direction? What I'm not here to do today is to tell you the answers, because I think anybody who has got the answers right now has got a crystal ball, and I'd like some lottery ticket numbers. What I am here to do is touching on what Sarah and Joe have said, is, you know, we're here to not just talk, we're here to actually walk the walk now as a company. And, you know, the reason I'm here is, you know, part of what I've been doing for all those years is saying, what's your aspirations and how do you actually deliver it? And what I've found, and I'm sure you have, is this, it's that tricky bit in between, which is how do we go from, well, we're going to be fabulous, to how we're actually going to deliver it. And more and more people are getting qualified and trained and learning how to do that, but there's still a big void and there's a lot of learning. So what I wanted to do today really is rather than sort of, as I said, having this is the answers, I'm not here to talk about the big rocks, and I'll talk about what I mean by big rocks in a minute. I'm here to say these are the steps, these are the frameworks we're going to follow, and this is the standards we're going to follow as a company. This is how you can hold us to account as to what we're going to be doing. And then we'll come back over time, once we've got all those bits of information that we can start sharing with you, and so you in the room and whoever's going to listen to the recording can see exactly what we're doing along the way. So that's sort of, yeah, a little bit about me. As I said, in terms of the presentation, it is very much process driven today, but any questions that you've got, I love them, you know, please feel free to ask them. Now I've got to work out how to do this. Oh, okay, there we go. Me and IT, not so good. Is that working? There we go. Right, so the plan for today, as I said, I'll talk for about 30 minutes and then any questions let me know. So first of all, I'm going to do the why. You know, what are those internal, external drivers? What's the what? And I think, you know, we've touched on real sense of purpose now that we've got as a business and our strategy. How, this is the standards and the framework, and then where we're going to get to in terms of action, and then the when. That's the part we still need to come back to on, but I'll give you sort of an outline of where we're going to aim to go. So I think as I was touching on and Sarah's touched on, yes, we are an energy company. So that's why I sort of, you know, highlighted that how does an energy company get to net zero? Well, I think the key thing to say, we're absolutely the same as any other company. And I think that's the main thing. And I'm sure in terms of Sustainable Business Initiative, we're still a company that has our own internal emissions and our internal environmental impacts, which we need to manage. And this is, what does it mean for waste? What does it mean for energy efficiency in our offices? What does it mean in terms of our service areas? What does it mean in terms of our fleet of cars? What does it mean in terms of, you know, how we're getting around the island? These are all things which all businesses have that have sort of operational areas. And then there's this external piece, which is then our product at this point in time is a fossil fuel, albeit the lowest carbon fossil fuel. And I think this is the clear message. So what we need to do is say, we need to look at what we're doing as a business, and that's what we're going to talk about, what we're going to do to lower those emissions and understand our footprint. And that's the part which I think all businesses in the room, you've got something that, you know, you can see what we're doing and you can see why we're doing it. And then there's the external part, which is, you know, how do we contribute as a business to the energy transition for each of the islands we're in? So that's our sort of global commitment. That's our island commitment. That's what do we need to do in terms of helping our customers reduce their carbon emissions, and then the islands produce what they need to. So it's two very different things, and it's two very different approaches that we're going to go through. So I'll talk you through that. So in terms of our carbon agenda or the strategy, I think as Sarah and Joe have touched on, each of the islands have got, you know, one common thread. All of them signed up to the Paris Agreement. That's all in terms of net zero by 2050, and then obviously interim targets along the way. So we've all put our sort of our flag on the mast. So each of those islands have got the same agenda, the same as the agenda of most countries around the world that have signed up to the Paris Agreement. And what's happening is each of the governments are responding in different ways at different speeds and giving different degrees of certainty. Well, what does that mean? It means for investors and companies, it means that there's degrees of certainty as to what we're going to do. So there's two ways that we could as a business respond. We could either be reactive or proactive. What we're looking to do is say, how do we proactively, because we are obviously an energy provider, help support those governments. So part of the work we're going to be doing in terms of getting to net zero is saying we want to work together with the governments in each of the islands, and that's partly where my role came in terms of sort of understanding what it takes when you're actually within the government to have those questions, but also as a business. We're owned by a private equity company. You know, they're going to want to know where that investment, you know, what are we going to do? How are we going to diversify? So in terms of that carbon agenda, it's very much we're being proactive in terms of where the governments are going, and we're being reactive in terms of where we've been. As Sarah said, you know, we've got a lot of catching up to do, but we're ready to do that now. So as you can see from that slide, each of the islands have got different pathways, different regulation, either pending or in place. And those are going to be those key milestones that we're going to be setting, and sort of in answering that question, how do we transition to net zero? So in terms of the Isle of Man, what are we doing in terms of decarbonisation opportunities? As you'll see there, it's very generic. There's a lot of we're going to explore. It's going to be in terms of carbon offsetting. I think as we've talked about before as a business, there was a lot of messaging out in terms of the removal and avoidance offset that we signed up to as a business. I think one of the key things I want to say is that's still really valid. As an environmental professional, what we've got to say is we're still contributing to managing carbon emissions around the world by saying that we are offsetting the gas that we're providing to our customers. That's still very valid. What we're doing differently as a business is we're saying we're taking that step back and we're saying now how are we actually going to get to net zero as well. So I think I've got a slide in a minute that sort of clarifies the difference between net zero and carbon neutral, and I'll sort of park that for now, but we're doing both is the short answer. We want to look at all those big rocks, and I think that the analogy that I always use for the energy transition is if anyone's ever done a time management course and you've got the glass jar and they put in the big rocks and they say, right, I've filled up all my time. If everybody's spending all their time talking about what big rocks is part of the energy transition, will it be wave, will it be tidal, will it be hydrogen, whatever else? That we'll basically spend a lot of time talking about those big rocks, and then there's all of the pebbles and the gravel and the sand and the water in there. So for where we're moving to as a business is we're saying, absolutely, we want to be around the table and have a conversation for each of those islands as to those big rocks. But what we're also here to do, and where we're moving as a business in terms of energy management, and that's where we are focusing on not only internally how we look at our pebbles and our sand and our water, but also externally, how can we help our customers? And this is all the energy management that we're moving into in terms of those products and services. So absolutely same in the Isle of Man, absolutely same in the Channel Islands in terms of what we're looking at. I think the key part for us is when those timelines are being put in by the government, we're going to be as proactive as we need to and move as quickly as we can, and that's really the focus of our strategy. And again, any other questions on that, do let me know at the end. But what is very clear, and in case you're wondering what's on those pictures, one of them is a CEO or an executive looking out and sort of blue sky gazing as to what's the future. And the one next to it is a lot of CEOs and execs with their heads in the sand. So that is effectively saying 96% of CEOs go, yes, absolutely, sustainability should be integrated into company strategy and opportunities. this sometimes comes up as sort of, you know, one at a time, but 49% of CEOs actually cite that the complexity of actually how to implement this across the functions is one of the hardest things, and that's where most businesses fail. Difference is, as an energy company, we can't fail. We have to know how to do it. So the reason we've got the CEO here today, who's absolutely firmly committed to it, the reason that she's brought me in to be one of the MDs is what better place to put somebody that's an environmental professional than as an MD of one of those companies. Because how many of you have been in a boardroom conversation or having those meetings where actually those who are in those leadership roles don't really know how to deliver things, and that's where you start saying what's the chance of succeeding. So
I think it's important to note we've also brought in an external team that are accelerating that programme through the business as well. So it isn't just one MD doing their BAU job and trying to accelerate a programme and a roadmap.
absolutely.
We've brought in individual external companies that are helping us actually cement that into our strategy.
Absolutely, and just to follow on from that, as part of that, and I'll come on to that as we're going through, we have got external consultants that are working on our carbon footprint and our carbon reporting set and models. We have got a company that's experts that are working with us in terms of putting together our strategy, and we are working with, without sort of giving all the answers now, but in terms of our environmental management system to sort of do the external validation on that. So this I'll come on to again. This is how we're demonstrating that we're actually walking it this time. So yeah, sustainability is going to be a challenge, but one of the key things that we need to do is make sure that as a business we're really grounded and we've actually got a real sense of purpose. And you can see from the slide that we've got up there is, you know, what we're saying our purpose is dependable energy to be proud of for every generation, and I think that is beyond gas to energy management. And why we're existing is not only for our customers, but also so that we wanted pride for everybody that's working for this business. I think one of the big changes that Joe's put in is everybody that's joined this business has got a really strong sense of purpose. We're not just here because we want to take a paycheck. We're here because we want to be part of an energy transition. And I think that's where we're moving into a very different world and a different conversation. So yeah, customers are absolutely key. Employees are key. You know, everyone I'm talking to in my business is who wants to join, is asking questions, what are we doing? So it's actually driving who we're employing as to what we're doing here. So there's an awful lot behind it. And I said, yeah, partners and shareholders. No one's getting away from the fact that unless there's a business reason for doing it, then it's very hard to do it. So anyway, there's a strong sense of purpose behind it.
I think it's safe to say that when I joined the company, no one knew what the vision and strategy was. And everyone, I'm looking at Luke, who is an employee, everyone assumed that it was a gas company and we were dying, right? So employees' actual response to me was, yeah, but we'll be gone in 5 years, won't we? And that's because if you don't tell them what the pathway is, they all assume that gas is a dying business. And there's a cold hard reality that we've got 25,000 boilers on the wall, right? And they're not going to be ripped out in the next 5 years. Some of those have still got 19 years left in them because they've just been installed. So what supplies those boilers? Gas. So gas isn't going away, but it's a product and it isn't a company name, right? And so all of that vision and strategy piece, that slide that you just saw, is we started with why. Why do employees want to come? Why do customers want to buy? Why do shareholders want to invest? Why? Start with why. And it's a classic, if anyone watched Simon Sinek, you start with why. And so we did that as a company and said, why do we come to work every single day? And so we created that mission slide and then communicated it to every single employee.
Yeah.
And that makes everybody understand our direction of travel. And so that's why that slide was really important.
And I think the other key thing is, you know, a lot of people have said, you know, why did I join it? You know, I've got a background of 25 years in the environment. Well, the reason I joined it is exactly as Joe was saying. You know, I was there working for Guernsey Electricity. You know, I've been there for 5.5 years as their environmental sustainability manager, and I said working with the states. And I was looking at Guernsey Gas, now Guernsey Energy, and sort of the analogy I've got is it was very much like a dying ant on its back, just waiting, like flickering hands. And I was there going, get up! You've got such a role to play in this energy transition because electricity is not the sole answer. And that was me very much as an environmental focus, saying we've all, you know, we need that. We needed Guernsey Gas, but now Guernsey Energy. We need to all be playing a part in it. So that's why, you know, that's my purpose. So that's the reason I'm here. And as Joe said, the next step, as well as having that really strong purpose, is making sure we've got the right mission in place right at the top. So again, this is the North Stars. This is this long-term vision for IEG. This is this starting point really to go back to that question: how does an energy company or fossil fuel company transition? We need to actually know what we right there front at the beginning, those North Stars. So we've got a great place to work. As I said, great place to work is, as I said, people who are coming to me are saying, what are we doing in terms of the energy transition? Or they've seen us move, or they've seen, and we're getting people coming to us because they're seeing that change. So great place to
They
work.
want to be part of the change.
Yeah.
People that are coming to us for jobs today are saying, I want to be part of your change.
And why they're moving
can
from
I
other energy companies, other fossil fuel energy companies, is because that maybe those aren't moving. And they're seeing that we are. So anyway, I think anyone in terms of businesses around the room will know that this is, we're preaching to the converted, as in, this is the main reason why, all businesses need to go in the right direction. Safe, responsible business, absolutely, 100%. Gas to energy management, that one's key. So you're seeing there, gas to energy management. What we're doing is, this is the big rocks, and this is all the small ones in between, as I was talking about. And the one that I'm leading on as part of the business, as well as the MD role, is role model net zero future. That's a freaking big aspiration. If we're going to role model it, that means we've really got to know how to do it. So yeah, no pressure. Sorry.
We all have the North Stars. We created the North Stars together as a company, and that's really important because for me, when sometimes you're looking at the future and the big rocks and all that lovely stuff, you forget the basics, which is always be a safe and responsible business. And that means we have to ensure that everything we do has safety in mind. The second thing is that we're responsible, so we're doing the right things for our employees, for our customers. And the gas to energy management, that's a big juicy rock, but it is about how do we move into people managing their energy better rather than just turning their boiler on and off. And that means that we have to bring in a huge amount of new products and services that are the gravel and water, not just start pumping hydrogen into our infrastructure.
Yeah. So we've drilled down in terms of, so we've got our mission, we've got our purpose. The next one down is in terms of our net zero environmental strategy. So this is where we're starting to build. And as I said, this is what we're working on now. So we started off in February and we're starting to get those building blocks in place. So in terms of the strategy that's being developed as we speak, these are not set in stone, but what we're putting in place is those pillars. So under that dependable energy to be proud of for every generation, we've then got these are sort of the draft pillars. What I'm showing you is what we need to then sort of still go through as part of the business. One of them is that net zero commitment. That's the internal lens. That's saying, what are we doing to manage and measure our own internal emissions so we can understand them, and how can we reduce them across all service areas. The next one is the energy management. This is the sand and the gravel. How do we diversify our offering so that we are helping to support the energy transition? The next one is that cleaner, greener energy. How are we looking at, those are the big rocks. What part do we play in terms of that decarbonisation? Then the next one we've got, and this is a bit which sort of in terms of my background, I started off life as an ecologist, and a lot of the work I was doing in the States is very much looking at the blue and green carbon economy and what role sort of nature has in it all. And it's obviously very key in terms of climate change. So the last one there is, what are we giving back? What are we giving back to our community? And this is tying back in again in terms of nature-based solutions and community initiatives. This is this positively impact on the natural environment, because that is all linking back in terms of net zero. So it's not just what we're doing in terms of engineering, it's also how we're doing in terms of carbon sequestration, in terms of protecting our natural environment. So part of this business is going to be key in grounding this business in each of the island communities. So that's us saying, right up there, that's our net zero environmental strategy. What do we do next? Well, the first thing I need to do is, I think, put up and say what we need to do is make sure that we don't then fall into greenwashing, because a lot of businesses, they put a nice flash strategy up. It's all got lots of lovely pretty pictures. It says, oh, fabulous, we're going to do this, and oh, we're going to do that. They haven't got a clue how to deliver it. And what normally happens is it then moves into greenwash. So what I used to do, someone used to ask me in a networking thing, what's my job? What I used to say I'm the greenwashing police. I'm the one that says, don't let that comms out, because it's saying, you can't say that, or don't say we're basically a carbon neutral country and we're a carbon neutral company, and we're just sort of offsetting everything. We've got to do that differently. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, right, we've got we're going to get this strategy. The next thing we need to do is how to translate it into action. So this is what the next part of this presentation is saying, what those building blocks. So the first one is get that's your strategy in place. We're working on that as fast as we can. That's due out in the next few weeks. So we'll be able to obviously start releasing information about that. Next one, understand our carbon footprint and environmental impact. You've got to know the baseline. We've got to know where we're starting with. Next one is develop a glide path, an action plan, how to actually reduce it, actually know how to do that. And oh, have we got 2, 3? Yeah, got 2 step 3s. Obviously, they're both equally as important. The next one is ensuring that we've got a structured feedback loop. So this is where I'll move into this plan, do, check, act, because if we don't know how we're doing that, we're not actually moving anywhere as a business. And I think, as everybody knows, sustainability is you need to continually improve. We've got some sort of buzzwords and terminology in the business. One of them is continually tweaking. As soon as I heard it, I loved it, because that, as a sustainability specialist, that is effectively what sustainability is. It's continually tweaking what we're doing. That's what it's going to be in terms of, you know, our journey to net zero. We will have to keep continually tweak it, the same as all governments are doing it, the same as all jurisdictions are doing around the world. So that's what the Paris Agreement is. So as they're continually tweaking, we're continually tweaking, and it's yeah.
Yeah, we talk about 3 behaviours to deliver the North Stars, and 2 of them are constant tweaking, and the other one is get out of your lane, because you can imagine that a lot of people in our company have only done gas, right? So we're saying in order to really diversify and transition as a company, we have to constantly tweak and get out of our lane. And I really love it because it's a language that's stuck in our culture.
Absolutely, it's there. It's right in there. Love it. Right, the next one is, as an energy company, we need to go above and beyond. Now, a lot of the sort of work I've done is sort of advising companies what kind of framework. There's so many different frameworks that you can use. What we're doing as an energy company is we're saying we need to go above and beyond a framework. We need to put we need to sign up to standards where you actually know that we are being held to account by it. And I think Joe was saying, in terms of using external suppliers to verify what we're doing, we're not just saying we're going to be doing something, we're actually going to sign up to those standards and actually say we're going to deliver on it. So the first one got there is in terms of our carbon, in terms of science-based targets. That is, again, aligned to the Paris Agreement. It is, and I'll touch on it again in the next slide, it is the net zero standard that we're going to be signing up to. And part of that requirement is it requires you to continually tweak. It requires you to continually improve and reduce our carbon emissions as a business. So we're signing up to that to demonstrate that. ISO, we're signing up to a standard because we've got to have a framework in place to actually deliver it. So this is the Plan, Do, Check, Act. But we're going to sign up for certification. We obviously need to start. The caveat is it needs to take time. We need to align first, but we are going for certification, and we're going to put our flag on the mast to say that. It's also important, and I always talk about these 2 branches for an environmental sustainability tree. One is very much in terms of carbon emissions, but the other part is you can't forget environmental and social impact either, because if you don't have 2 branches, your tree will fall over. And that's what I sum up. Just being an old school environmental specialist, I think there's a lot of people very much focused on carbon, whereas I'm very much got to ground it in the local environment as well. So what we need to look at is our sustainable development goals. So we're not just going to say we're going to align to it and aren't we fabulous. We're actually going to say, right, we're going to become a B corporation. So we're going to start off in terms of B Lab and going through the questionnaire process, but then we're going to be able to track against it. You'll be able to see what we're doing against it. And again, all of this is not only demonstrating as a business what we're doing, but it's also showing you and our employees and our customers that we're not just talking, we're actually walking now. And then, yeah, the Plan, Do, Check, Act. I talk about it in my sleep. I love it so much. Right, the next one is net zero versus carbon neutral. I think the first thing you can see is there's a whole can of worms when you're talking about carbon neutral. What has been the massive step change has been the development of the 2 standards to help define and guide businesses and jurisdictions as the difference between the 2. So we've now got carbon neutral is standard past 2060. And then we've got net zero, which is the science-based targets we were talking about. And the big difference is going back to what did we do previously as a business? We said we're going to be carbon neutral, we're going to offset everything, but we're not actually going to change anything as a business. Absolutely. And I have to sort of say that is not bad. That is still moving the process. That is still helping. It means that you can, the difference is it means you can cut off parts of the business. It means that you can have a plan, you need to have a plan in place, but as I said, you can say, right, I'm going to be carbon neutral, but only these particular parts of it. You can offset immediately, so you can say, right, I'm zero to hero straight away, but it's not, you wouldn't necessarily have to do a huge amount internally as long as you were just continually improving. So that could be continually improving for 50 years. And as I said, you can use avoidance offsetting. And there's a big difference between avoidance and removal. Removal is, it's very much sort of helping to restore peat beds, or it's preserving peat beds. It's removing the loss of that carbon. So this is again tree planting or preserving, sort of rewilding the lights. Avoidance is you're helping another jurisdiction or a business around the world to say, use a coal-fired power station and they're going to put in a wind farm. We're helping to sort of fund that, and that's how you're reducing the carbon around the world. But it's not as good as it could be. What we're saying, right, no, we're going for science-based targets. It means that you have to have the entire organisation. So we're not going to just cut and shunt it. It means you have to look at all scope 1, 2 and 3. And for us as a gas company, scope 3 includes our gas. So that's a biggie. As soon as we're saying we're including in it, it means that we're committed to an energy transition. So again, that flag's really well and truly in there. We're only going to be using removal offsets. So previously, what we did as businesses, it involved avoidance and removal. We're now changing that. So what we're still going to be doing is we're still going to be offsetting whilst we're doing net zero. So we're putting more belt and brace on, but we're changing what we're doing to being removal only. So again, that's one step closer. Yes, you can't use avoidance offsetting if you're going for science-based targets, and you need to report on what you're doing. So all of that is pretty much, I think, going back to that greenwashing banner, we're ready to walk it. So that's what we're doing in terms of our standards, and saying hopefully you're giving the reassurance of what we're doing. The next bit is how we're actually going to do it internally. So what have we done? As I said, we've kicked off developing our own scope 1, 2, scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3 carbon footprints. That's ongoing at the moment. We're breaking that down not only into the big bucket, we're also breaking that down into service area. What does it mean? We can then, when we're looking at science-based targets, we can say, what does it mean for our network? What does it mean for our gas production and distribution? What does it mean for our office? These are all the things, apart from the gas bit, that all of you as business owners or business runners are looking at as well. So we're in this together, and you can see how we're going to be sort of transitioning to do with that. We're putting together a working group. So we've got a net zero working group. And that function is we're bringing people from all different parts of the business. So it's not just the leadership team saying, oh, aren't we brilliant, look what we've done. We're actually bringing everybody. So this is where everybody's getting ideas. This is why people are wanting to join the business. I said, we're interviewing people, they're saying, are we getting involved in this? Yes, you can get involved. If you've got an idea, bring it. I mean, in my previous organisation, we formed a similar group, and it was absolutely incredible, the ideas that people brought. We had people who are running, working on the power station. I think he was just above an apprentice, and he came and said, do you know what? I've watched how we've got all this pipe work around the power station. Surely if we just went from A to B instead of all around there, then there'd be less carbon because we wouldn't be heating as wide an area. That change, I can't remember the exact figure, but it was a huge difference once we actually worked that out. What I'm saying is we need all those people around the table. And this is where I go back to the whole sort of collaboration. It's just not just internally we need working groups. This is where we need the energy. I don't know, I'm not close enough to what's going on in the Isle of Man, but in Guernsey, we're just forming an energy partnership, which is all industry participants, and it's specialists, and it's the government to work out how to do that. So it's not just is the apprentice having an idea about how if we had shorter pipe work, we'd have less energy loss. It's the same as how we can do this for an island. So yeah, we've got a working group. We're also doing a lot of work, sort of, as I said, part of the energy partnership. I still sit on the Sustainable Business Initiative for the Chamber of Commerce. We just did a panel session, I think, last Monday for Chamber, and we did another one the month before on energy transition. So we're getting out and having those conversations. So it's not just keeping things internally. The next thing we need to do is look at the total cost of ownership. I think as any business, anybody who's involved in a business, you need to know how much this is going to cost. This is why we can't say, well, we're going to be this within 5 years, because it's going to take time, but we need to know how much it's going to cost. So we've got to cost all of these initiatives up that are coming in, and then we need to plan where it's going to fit on that glide path. I said that's all the feasibility. That's where we need to go back to the business, back to the board, and say, look, this is how much the big rock's going to cost. This is how much the pebbles are going to cost. is how much the sand's going to cost. And they'll go, right, okay, well, how's that going to work? And, you know, because we are in a situation, we're in a transition, we are going to reach a point where, you know, gas customers, yeah, we're going to have this point where we need to work out where that is and what does all this mean. So this is huge for the business. What we've also got is another working group, and I think Sarah or Joe touched on earlier, which is sort of gas to energy management in the tech group. This is, you know, what are we doing in terms of calculating everything, but what are we doing in terms of the tech that's going on? So we've got people from all over the business again, not just the, you know, leadership team, or what we're going to have this conversation. The apprentices are going to have a chance, the people who, you know, who are involved in the LPG operations site, to actually go and see what's happening in terms of hydrogen, see what's happening in terms of alternative green LPG and biofuels, see what the options are for us and bring it all back. And their job is to say, right, well, this is how this would fit in, this is when it's going to be available. Yeah, they're saying hydrogen's great, but it's not going to be for X number of years. So we've got to build this in and cost it as well. So what do we get next? The next important thing that we need to do, and you can see I've circled it in red, and this is really the reason. It goes back to that, why did I put in bold, how does a fossil fuel company reach net zero, is when you break down your emissions into scope 1 and scope 2. Scope 1 and scope 2 to us as a gas company is very similar to a lot of other organisations that have got an operational footprint, that's got a fleet of vehicles and a large number of employees and different companies in different jurisdictions, which means flying and everything else. We've all got the same sort of things that we're dealing with. So the scope 1 and scope 2, we've got to be realistic. That's our first focus, is making sure that we fully understand our scope 1 and scope 2 for different service areas. But what you'll then see is the rest of that big pie chart, which is the scope 3. And that's what all businesses have a big issue, because that means we've got to look along our supply chain. We've got to help influence our supply chain. We've got to put sustainable procurement strategies in place that we're going to say, what are you doing? But that's where we've got, as a gas company, our gas that we're obviously selling. That's our product. That's our main product at the moment. So our scope 3 is huge compared to a lot of other organisations. So the previous organisation I worked for, it was obviously sitting under scope 1 and scope 2 because we were generating electricity, as is in scope 3. So this is where we've got to really do a huge amount of work. So what we're going to be doing is scoping that, and it's not an easy task, and there is a huge amount to do. So there is no answers, but we're absolutely putting all those building blocks to do it. What are we going to get at the end? This isn't ours, but what you will see, and once we've got it, is our strategy for net zero, which is going to say by 2025 we're going to be looking into this. By 2030 we're going to have, you know what of the big rocks we're interested in. We'll have a much better idea where hydrogen, what a much better idea about what we could do in terms of security of supply to the island. What does it mean for our network? What do we need to upgrade? What do we need to change? These aren't going to come overnight. As I said, as Joe and Sarah have said, you know, we're putting it in place, but we will come back to you with what we've got. And I think the biggest change that I've certainly seen in terms of Guernsey and Jersey is we're now an open book in terms of having those conversations, and we want to be here having those conversations. And yeah, difficult questions all the nights. So this is what we're going to come back to you with that glide path as soon as we can. What else is important? It's that gas energy journey. This is the rocks, the pebbles, and the sand. This is the short term in terms of what we're doing in terms of looking at the date that we can actually release. We've got down there in terms of August for a net zero roadmap launch. We've got a huge amount of work to do between now and August. I was keen to come along and have the conversation with you so you can see what we're going to be doing between now and August in terms of putting all of these standards in place. As I said, aligning, not certifying or getting the formalities, that will take time to do, but we're starting to align all of our internal processes to it. So I think that's a key sort of technical distinction we need to make. But in the meantime, as I said, we're rolling out smart homes. We're looking at various products and services, and that's what we're working on at this point in time. Looking at smart meter rollouts, I mean, you can see the timelines up there. This one here we've put is for Guernsey. It'll be different timelines for different islands. As we've talked about before, there's different, you know, we can't do everything at once. We're trying to do everything as quickly as we can, but there are different timelines.
It will be a very similar timeline. So in August, what you'll actually see is our clear roadmap to 2050. It's safe to say that will move and shift, but it's putting our baseline in the sand to say this is what we are going to be doing as a company. That will be public, and we will regularly keep you updated as to how we're tracking against that baseline. Because it's safe to say that's our ambition, but things change. So it's important that we set our stall out in August and we're open about what does that look like. And we deliver really key proof points, and we keep you regularly updated as to how we're delivering against those proof points that we set ourselves. And that's all we can do as a company. And I think you'll probably agree, up until now, we haven't set that baseline out. We've been quite private about what are we doing about it. What we'll be talking about is what are the rocks that we're looking at, what are the rocks that we're investigating, and then we'll be coming back on the narrative of we've looked at this and we've discounted it because of this, or we've accepted that that is what we're going to go after, and this is the infrastructure investment we're going to have to do as a result of agreeing and locking in that big rock. The timeline here that we've put, even though it says Guernsey, it is very similar to the Isle of Man. So in September, we will launch a very clear energy management portfolio strategy with a whole range of new products and services, which is really critical to us diversifying away from gas. And I think that you'll all be quite surprised about what we're capable of doing, but we're putting that building block in, and in September, I mean, we'll do an announcement before then, won't we, Sarah? But we will be announcing quite a big portfolio of services that allows people to move into managing the energy in their home and not just talking to us about gas.
I think that goes back to that scope 3 and what we're doing for an island. It's very much, what are we doing for the island? We're helping to reduce that demand. And so these products and services are absolutely key. And this goes back to this, as we're looking at signpost, internal, external lens. So yeah, it's very exciting. It's not just what role does gas play, but how do we help that reducing the demand, so reducing the carbon for an island. So it is a big commitment. And so just following on from that, it's not all about carbon. This is where we've got that wider, we're looking at those UN Sustainable Development Goals. So this is where we're saying absolutely as part of that, we've got the commitment to climate change, absolutely in terms of, so the background is there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It was released by the UN. There are various international organisations that have come together and countries around the world. It started off with countries signing up to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and then they release soon after the equivalent for businesses, and then there's the equivalent of even down to sort of information and approaches for individuals or schools called the Good Life Goals. So these are all these things that we're going to be adopting as part of initiatives that we can do it sort of in terms of our community and looking at the business. And then again, we're going to track against it to hold us to account, which I'll show in the next slide. So what we've done here is we've mapped the sort of the priority 6, because out of the 17, if you scatter too much, you don't achieve. So we want to stay focused. Again, if we're going to talk about it, we need to focus in. So you can see there we've picked 3. Again, this might go through continual tweaking once we've actually reviewed it as part of the business, as part of the strategy before it's finalised. But the ones we've put forward at the moment are ensure healthy lives and promote well-being at all ages. So that's part of that is obviously that we're here to heat homes, but we're also here to heat communities. So that's very strong for us. There's ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable and modern energy for all. Again, that's key. We're in a gas crisis or wider energy crisis. So, these are things, but we still need to do our part to see what does that mean in terms of the community and what can we do to improve things. We're looking at proportionate and sustainable economic growth. Again, what part do we play in terms of that process? We're looking at building resilient infrastructure. This is all the energy management. This is all the smart homes. This is saying, what can we do in terms of working with the wider community and wider partners in terms of anything from installation and lights to sort of get that, help that demand change and help that transition. And ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns. This is again all aligning where do we fit in. And then obviously the big hitter 13 is in terms of climate change. And under that, we've put environmental in terms of, I know there's 14 and 15, which is life on land and life underwater. But what we're saying is if we're looking at it all through 13, then we're giving our accountability to that as well. But what we're doing is we're saying, right, here's another flag to the mast. We are saying that we're going to be signing up and doing the questionnaire, which is the UN Sustainable Development Goals for B Corporation. What that means is it's looking across the business. So again, it's not just saying what we're doing for climate change, what are we doing for our carbon emissions? It means what are we doing linking back to the North Star of a great place to work? What are we doing in terms of managing safely? So by that questionnaire, so I don't know if anybody's sort of gone through that process, but it's very much sort of saying everything about, you know, are we employing people on 0 hours contracts and with no pension, or are we actually committed to our employees? All of these things are all sort of tying back in, because it gives that message that we have got a sense of purpose and we mean it across the organisation. So again, we're holding ourselves to account on this. And it's not just us as a business that wants to do it. You know, in terms of the backing from our private equity firm, investment firm, they're driving it as well. You know, they're wanting us to make sure that we've got this in place. And one of the things that I was so reassured by when I got involved is when I started sort of, you know, being introduced to the board and the members of the investment company, and they're going, we need this, you know, get this for us. And I'm going, fantastic. Part of my job in my previous life, as I sort of say, is trying to convince boards, trying to convince people to actually sign up for it. I spend most of my time with the analogy of I would have had, you know, like bumps on the back of my head from trying to actually get this through. And that's what 25 years in the industry done. You know, the world was a very different place, and you know, where we are now is they're demanding it. Fantastic, bring it on, we can do that. I'm conscious of the time, so I'll stop, I'll get on a little bit, but I wanted to just put a slide in there. As part of all of the climate change, part of sustainable development goals is also that nature-based solution. So the reason we've got it as one of those pillars is we can't, as an energy company, talk about purely tech and everything else. We also need to say, what are we doing back for our community? Because addressing climate change is not just the tech, it's not just reducing the carbon, it is, you know, what we're doing in terms of that nature-based solutions part. So it will form part of that, and that's again grounding back into the islands. So what's next? I think the other key thing that we've got is the management system. So we've talked about standards, we've talked about what we're doing in terms of the process. The last one there is how we're actually going to walk it. And this is where, again, we're putting our flag to another mast, which is an ISO environmental management system. This is tying in what we're doing, it's saying at the board. This is saying, what are we doing in terms of our objectives, our mission statement? What are we doing in terms of our North Star? What are we doing in terms of policy? What are we doing across the business in terms of where we're looking at it, and how we're actually going to deliver it in terms of processes and action? So this is bringing it all together into actually how we're telling the business how we can do it. And that last bit of that sustainability is that plan, do, check, act. And again, we can load these slides up if you'd like to see them, but effectively it's planning what we're going to do, understanding our baseline, understanding what we're going to do, defining our commitments. This is all the strategy piece and all the action plans. The next one's the doing. We need to roll out that EMS rather than just talking about it. We need to do the risk screening. We need to do the assessments. We need to plan how we're monitoring our performance. We need to make sure that we've got champions across the business in the service areas. The next one we've got is checking that it's working. This is what we've got our net zero working group. This is why we've got external suppliers that we're working with. This is why we've got, in terms of HSE committee, this is all the sort of checking that we're actually delivering on it. And then the next one is acting on it. KPIs, these are all the things that through a management system you need to have if you're going to get certification under ISO. It means we're saying that we're not, you know, we're doing an annual management review. This is all the ways that we're driving sustainability. We're putting those in place. So by saying that we're signing up to a management system, a lot of companies, again, they slip down, is they put in they say we're going to sign up to this framework, but it's not actually then the building blocks of how to actually deliver it. So by saying that we've got the belt and braces of a management system as well, that's us showing how we actually know how to take vision, strategy, standards and say we're going to sign up to a framework, and then this is the actual doing part. So on this last slide, continually tweaking. As we were saying at the beginning, see, love it. This is effectively a very, very busy and slightly messy slide, sums up the energy transition. But what we're saying along the top is in the short term, what are we doing to put all of this in place? We're saying it's going to take us time to do it. We've got a very busy year ahead of us. But what we're going to get at the end of it is a management system and a framework we can start implementing, and we can start putting those dates. These aren't in stone, they will be continually tweaking, certainly until we've got it and we're ready to go live on it. But what I wanted to show you is we're aware that it's going to take time. We're aware that we want to get to the point that we're going to commit by saying we're going to have a date for certification, not just talk about it. What we've got along the bottom is all of those external drivers, which is, I think we've got this one for Jersey, showing what's the government saying in terms of releasing its carbon neutral roadmap. What are we saying in terms of the new portfolio that they're putting in terms of their ministerial portfolio for climate change? what we're saying is how are they reviewing what they're doing in terms of their carbon targets? And the reason that it's going to be on our glide path is because it's so key that we know. And I don't know if there's anybody from the government here, but it's so key for us to have that dialogue and know what those dates are, because we want to align to them. And the more we know, the more we can work with you to say how it will fit in as being one of the main energy providers. And in behind all the scenes is how we're going to reduce our carbon. This is the big rocks. This is all the propositions we're going to be putting out. This is all our products and services that we're going to be talking about. So I'm hoping by what I've kind of talked through today, and I know it's very sort of process and detail heavy, is I wanted to sort of maybe just press pause and say, yeah, we've done a lot of talking in the past. Yes, there's things which we wouldn't necessarily we would have done differently. But what we're doing now is we're saying, right, we're not just moving to Guernsey Energy from Guernsey Gas and changing names or anything else. We actually know what we're doing to actually put things in place to do this, and just bear with us, see what's coming out in terms of our communications, see that we're actually here engaging and wanting to have these conversations, and just watch this space, because we're really committed. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alex. It's great to see the Kaizen model up there. Well done. I think it really is useful to hear that the leadership team are committed to planning and making some action. So I'm great to get those rocks and pebbles in as well.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. So, questions. We've got 50 minutes.
I'd like to clarify one point, please.
Absolutely.
You put several slides with the Science-Based Target Initiative.
Yeah.
I'll just quote from their website. The SBTI is unable to accept commitments or validate targets for companies in the oil or gas sector or fossil fuels.
At this time.
So it's a little misleading to talk about the SBTI when they don't allow any fossil fuel companies to participate.
At this time, and what we've said there is in terms of aligning, there's multiple. I think to take a step back, in terms of the methodology and the standards, it's very much saying, what are we going to do? How does it differ from carbon neutral? So, and I think the actual quote is at this time. So they're actually working and developing it now. So by the time we've actually got our alignment in place, they will have released it. So they're working on it now.
We appreciate that, Alex, and thank you for the presentation. I think it is important in transparency to be clear about what has and hasn't yet been done. Your slides did imply that you were engaged with the SBTI.
We're going to be aligning with that standard. I think this is
fine,
yeah.
But that's not what I saw.
I think it's important that you do align to a standard, because otherwise we can't set our own standards.
Agreed.
So-
And it's it's a very clear standard in terms of the actual principles, which
I
is
know
very
a lot
clear.
about it.
Yeah, and that's brilliant. So we can definitely have that conversation about it. But I think the key thing there is aligning to it. And I think we were saying before, is those standards are there. They're setting very, very clear guidelines to what we can do. In terms of those releasing those specific ones, I think it's the nuances of that standard. But yes, absolutely.
There is an obvious reason why they don't include fossil fuel companies, of course, and that's an ongoing discussion. But in terms of clarity, it's important to state that you're not a member of the SBTI. Indeed, no energy company is a member of the SBTI.
I think in terms of that past and actually, that's not actually technically correct. Natural gas is, because I sit on the Energy Network Association, so I sit on the environmental panel of that, and actually the energy companies in the UK are actually signed up to SBN. So it is.
I'll let other people have a comment, but I can prove that no energy company is aligned with the SBTI goals.
Aligned. They are aligned, but it's a different.
I think it's important that we align to it and that we try to work with them to get onto there. Because I think if we all went, well, we're not on it, I mean, so what? I think it's really important that we set our standards, and it's a really good structure that's there that people know, and we should be really targeting getting onto it. So I think it's a really good ambition. And I think if we go back to those slides, it's very much setting a date where we would go for certification, but as we were saying, it's aligning a lot of businesses around the world. And again, this goes back to the recommendation that I have. It's good to align, because then it means that you're putting it all in place by saying that, oh, well, there isn't a standard yet that we can actually go for certification. What you're actually doing is not actually
signing up to, you're not actually going for something, you're not actually putting the right systems in place.
Oh,
So again, it's
around.
exactly the same as, say, ISO 14001. As we've said before, we're going to be aligning with it. A lot of companies, the difference between the certification is an awful lot of paperwork a lot of the time. But if you're aligning with it and you can actually then get externally reviewed against that, you're still, I think the biggest thing for me in sort of the years that I've been working is advising companies, don't shoot yourself in the foot, don't do something that you can't afford to do, but actually aligning with those standards initially. And I think I did say we will then set dates where we can go for certification or anything else, is a whole lot better than actually not doing anything.
The SBTi also does not allow offsets, which is a key part of the max
removal.
gas strategy.
They allow removal.
Was.
And
just to
I think
be
we just clearly said that.
And
we're
just
not going
and just to be
do that
clear,
going forward.
science-based targets does allow removal. It's avoidance offsetting that they don't allow. That's a clear difference
Which is
between
why
past 2060.
which is why we've decided to
Sorry,
change.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
it's a
I've
very
done it for a long time at SBTi.
yeah.
Thank you, Alex.
But it's a very different. Just to be
Chris,
clear.
I thought the point about the upsetting was very clear in the presentation, and that actually one of the things I wanted to pick up on a little bit, but more generally, and I really enjoyed the presentation, but it was, as you say, quite process heavy, and there were lots of teasers in there.
There are a lot of teasers
Yeah,
because we
and
still
so
need
I
to
kinda
develop
wanted
it all.
to
Yeah.
give it cheeky and kind of explore what some of those teasers might be teasing us about.
Yes,
And so
we like that.
because I think one of the key challenges of the energy transition is from fossil fuels to renewables, which is the big picture. isn't it?
Yeah.
And the challenge of renewables is essentially storage because it's intermittency. And if you think about the Isle of Man situation, the Isle of Man has abundant, will always have abundant renewable energy. We've got more than enough within our jurisdiction and its offshore waters to meet our needs indefinitely. And of course, with the energy, that's the other thing. And we always have to acknowledge that there are always gas boilers, people do need to warm that, and the rest of it. So there is a transition to be made. And I kind of wonder if you can enlighten us a little bit about how broadly you're redefining the sorts of energy problems that you might be thinking about in the context of intermittency.
Yeah, so I can help with that a little bit. So for me, there's several things that we can help with around the basics, get the basics right. So that, yes, we should be absolutely in parallel looking at do we look at hydrogen? Do we look at other renewable sources? We absolutely are doing that in parallel. For me, that's what Aidan is leading. Unfortunately, he can't be here because it's COVID, but he is firmly leading that and engaging to understand what investment do we need to make into our infrastructure, if any, to take on different fuel sources. So that's quite a big piece of work. And what are those other fuel sources? Because ideally what we want to be doing is in the future installing boilers that are open to all future fuels, right? So we're working with all those suppliers to say, yes, today the boiler roadmap is we install the current boilers as is and it supplies natural gas. But going forward, next year, as soon as next year, those boiler manufacturers are going to open those boiler sets up so that if we transition away from natural gas to another fuel source, those boilers will be able to take it. But we've got to then say, but can our pipes and our infrastructure take it as well? So all of that is a huge piece of work, which is why I separated them out. One, how do we actually become a net zero company? And two, what are the big rocks? So they're running in parallel together. So I think it's really important Aidan engages across the UK, across Europe, and he's doing that. We've got a working group that we're investing in going into the big companies that have already done a huge amount of resource. Because the reality check is we're a tiny little company that hasn't got a huge amount of profit. And therefore what we are doing is engaging with the likes of Centrica and SSE and all of those guys, EDF, and they're opening their doors and saying, we've just done all of this research. So come into the research groups and take our knowledge because we're not a competitor. And they're really super happy to do that. Good news is I came from Centrica, so I know a lot of people, and they've opened their doors and said, yeah, no problem, come into our R&D research labs. So that is a roadmap that's running in parallel, big stuff. The lower level parallel roadmap is what can we do right now? So that's about how do we buy? How do we get rid of old boilers? All those low hanging fruits. The reason that we launched Smart Home, so that's just launched, is because there is a huge amount of boiler sets on the island that just have an on-off switch. So people can't manage their energy very well because their boilers are really, really old. So rather than saying what you need to do is swap that up for another £6 boiler, what we're saying is, for the sake of £13.99 a month, we'll come and install a smart thermostat on it so you can put the control into here and you can operate it with voice. Just that alone drops the energy management piece in. That's a tiny, tiny pebble, and that's here right now. The second point is you have to have the energy management tool in people's digital platform, on their phone, on the web. So we have to start informing them of what energy they are using and what tips we can give them to drop that energy usage down. So in September, as early as September, we will be launching our new brand. We'll be dropping the word gas. I'm not going to steal our thunder because Sarah will actually put her hand over my mouth in a minute. But we'll be launching a brand new web platform that will allow consumers to be able to operate online. They'll be able to say what they're using. They'll be able to submit a meter reading live online. You know, today would make that quite hard for people. You have to phone in and say, hello, here's my meter read, right? And actually, we get a huge amount of estimates, which means people's bills are going like this at the moment. So we're going to remove all of that. And that's what I talk about, getting the basics right. And then what we have to do is give people choice. Because today we offer them one choice, which is gas. So what we will be launching is a product portfolio where we move firmly into, we have consultants in our portfolio today that can come into your home and tell you where you're inefficient. What the problem is today we come in and we say, here's a report that says why all of the things in your home is wrong. Bye-bye. What we're going to be doing for September with the use of that web platform is giving you the options of us being able to fix those problems for you. So we're going to say, here is where your home is inefficient. Here is what we can do to fix it for you. And by the way, you can spread that cost over 5 to 10 years. Because that's the other problem you've got, is consumers can't afford to put all this stuff in. They go, oh, okay, thanks very much, but I haven't got 10, 12,000 pounds in my bank account to make my home more efficient. So we're going to make that really, really easy for our consumers, give you the digital platform, give you the solutions, and allow you to spread the cost with us so that you can do it now. And that for me is critical before we even get to the big rocks, because what we're doing is locally investing in the infrastructure to make homes more efficient. Does that make sense?
Follow-up question to that. But in your thinking there, are you including things like energy storage and renewables in terms of the modelling that you're doing about how to enable people to make those transitions most effective?
So this year, no, because I don't have it in the kit bag, but next year for definite. But what I need to do is engage with partners to help me with that, because we don't have all the answers and we certainly don't have all the workforce. So this year it's about what can we do as a company here and now to speed up and accelerate that efficiency and make sure by Christmas people have more efficient homes, so we bring those bills down. Next year, we're going to be launching a partner portfolio where we're going to be engaging with all partners on the island to say, can you work with us so that we can offer a really big set and say, here is your consultation document. Here are the partners that we work with to enable you to deliver that. So that will be coming. We've identified that on our roadmap, but the how is the hard bit, as you can imagine.
Any other questions before I come back to John? Well, there is one question I've got, Alex. Just on the last slide, you said that scope 3 was outside of the report of 2050.
Outside the
Scope 3 was outside of 2050. Did that mean
no, not outside of 20. No.
Does that mean you're including scope 3?
Oh, absolutely,
before
yes.
2050?
Oh gosh, absolutely. Oh yes, sorry.
It does say on the slides outside of scope.
I think she was
Oh,
outside the scope for this year. So we've got to get one.
I think it would have been out of this year, but if it could have been out.
There we go.
Where's that?
2050, scope 3 currently.
Oh, that's because in Jersey, scope 3 is out of their targets. So so the ones in grey. So the states of Jersey have set that their scope 3 is excluded. So it's a government directive.
So the Isle of Man, Scope 3 will be included in.
Absolutely, and
Manx
so we go and say
gas,
yes,
energy,
absolutely, and the UK, yes.
Brilliant.
This is specific to the, I should have explained, so many apologies.
Right.
The grey arrows and bars are what has been set by the states of Jersey at that time, and at their point, they are aligning to carbon neutral, and they are excluding their Scope 3 from any of those milestones.
Thank you very much for explaining this. John.
So, Alex, I'm right in thinking that Guernsey Energy doesn't provide electricity, right?
That's correct.
That's correct.
So, I'm very sympathetic to Manx Gas's position, because we have provision of gas in the private sector and we have the electricity supply management procurement in the public sector. So many energy companies in the UK on the mainland, of course, are providing hydrocarbon products, fossil fuels at the same time as electricity. This provides them with far more flexibility in terms of decarbonisation, because they start to sell renewable electricity.
Yeah.
As far as I can see, Manx Gas are on a hiding to nothing here. This is a Chamber of Commerce meeting with business people. If you can't make a profit in business, your business will fail. Therefore, Manx Gas is being faced, and yourselves probably to a certain extent, with a declining market, because if net zero happens, gas is going to be phased out by 2050. So your business is actually going to start declining. So this is a complete conflict of interest, actually, with the objectives of running a business. So I only see the possibility of a radical solution, which is actually the merging of the electricity and the gas provision on the island under a single privatised business. And that's a major radical step, but otherwise I just don't see how Manx Gas can achieve that target.
Well,
Well,
the answer is to replace it with a different type of gas.
Mm.
Doesn't mean it has to be electric, right? So the point is, the big rocks are, what do we replace natural gas with? We replace it with some sort of green gas. There's a huge amount of work that's going into it. Do you replace it with hydrogen? What do you replace it with? So I don't think you can be as black and white as saying.
10 to 15% hydrogen by the year 2050, I would be astonished.
But the cold hard reality is the electric can't power the whole of the island. It just simply can't. The grid can't take it. So the reality is we don't have the answers, and that's what we're inferring here. Is first of all, it's a bit like saying all cars will be electric by 2030. No, they won't, because you've got cars on the island that are years and years and years old. The reality is there are a huge amount of boilers sitting on the wall that are being installed until 2026. That will take 25 years to completely replace all those boilers. So gas will still be supplied to those boilers for a long time to come. So we're not a dying business.
The transition must happen, and that you
It
can't
must,
just
but
turn off
electricity is the
gas.
answer, and
This is
merger.
true. But it will
And
be a
the merger
declining
isn't the
market
only
from a
answer.
business perspective.
It's a changing market, and I think, and these are the conversations that are happening absolutely in every jurisdiction, in every scale. So it's not sort of specific to the Isle of Man or Jersey. And I think what we were saying in the beginning, slides show that. What we're doing, certainly in Guernsey, I can't talk about the Isle of Man. In Guernsey and Jersey, it's very much sitting around and forming an energy partnership and saying, actually, this is where we need to collaborate. This is where we're saying, right. So, for example, using Guernsey, just last week we're having a conversation about, well, what does it mean in terms of backup security of supply? Does it mean that rather than having HO power station, do we have a gas power station like you've got? Does it mean that saying, in terms of peak lopping, is there something where gas can supply that? Is there something where we can use actually the network in terms of storage, as I think there's a conversation, whatever fuel that may well be? What does it mean in terms of sort of areas of the network that hasn't got the capacity? Is this where we can have community heat and power? Is this where we can have sort of CHP that can actually take some of that load, so we can have new housing developments where we couldn't if we had electricity? It's all about, going back to the beginning, I was saying about this sort of one horse race. My concern as an environmental specialist is if we put all our money on one horse, which is electrification, we run a really, really big risk that we won't be able to either afford it or we won't be able to actually deliver what we need to just with electricity. So what we're saying is, this goes back to this crystal ball. and there needs to be something which means that you can have multiple players in that market. That's the complexity that needs to come out. How do you have competition? How do you work out what's needed? So absolutely, that, you know, this all or nothing. I'm very much, rather than having a sort of black and white narrative, it's very much saying let's all get around the table and have a conversation and see what can work. But 100%, you know, we've got to go on an energy transition. We've got to net zero, as you're saying. You know, the reason that energy companies or fossil fuel companies are going to have a big problem with net zero is because there's going to be a big chunk that needs to be offset. Yes, it can be offset, but you need to demonstrate you've done everything first. And part of that is you need to demonstrate you're having the conversations as well. This is all this is what all of these standards do, that whether we align or go to
My point was a bit different, Alex. My point was that most energy companies have evolved into becoming energy. Most of the old fossil fuel companies, so you take Shell, for example, they're basically building up their renewables, they're investing in renewables plants, offshore wind farms, etc. So my point was only that it helps them in their reduction, because they're measuring their decarbonisation by the grams of carbon dioxide per megajoule of energy that they create. It's a intensity emissions reduction which is being measured in the fossil fuel industry. And
so
that's
standard. That's what
by owning
are,
assets in the renewable sector. What I'm saying is that Manx Gas, if they were to get further investment, should be investing in wind farms and should be transitioning across into that technology. Yes, gas will still be used in 20 years, but we have to have, according to the Paris Agreement, we've got to have net zero by 2050. The Isle of Man signed up for it.
Well, it's actually ratcheting forward, actually. So yes, I think it's going to be ratcheting much forward.
I mean, in Guernsey we've got an electricity license.
I did think John's point is quite similar to Chris's actually, about are you actually looking at the natural resources? That's what Chris's point was. Are you considering that in your calculations?
And the short answer is absolutely yes. What we're doing at the moment is we need to consider everything. But I think the part that I'd sort of separate off from that is, yes, as an island, as islands, we need to look at all options. It doesn't mean that one company needs to have all of those parts. What you need to do is be able to all work in a multimodal system, and how everyone's going to work together. That's what's needed in a small island potentially, because again, if it's a monopoly, you know, I feel very strongly, this is my personal view, that actually in order to reach the energy transition, you need as many players in the market that can actually contribute, and that's where you get a fair system back to your customers. So it's not who needs to be doing it, it's just making sure that it is available. So you know, whatever developer would like to do it, if there's a conversation of, you know, if someone wants to put in